Hey everyone, my name is Scrite. If you found this video and this channel, then chances are you saw my How to Play Oni guide video, or maybe you just found this one because you want to find some builds for Oni. Either way, in that video I stated I was going to work on some builds for Oni following 24.5. Well, this is that build video. 24.5 has been out for about 3 weeks on live servers at the time of releasing this video. And during all that time, I've been testing things on Oni, and I think I've come up with some pretty solid builds for him in the current meta. But first things first, I'm going to do something a little different from what you see in your usual build video. If one thing has been made clear by the 24.5 meta, it's that your perk synergy is pretty important. And there have been some breakout perk synergies that have been proving themselves to be very powerful currently. On top of this, some synergies overlap with each other, so I'm going to go a little in depth for the perk pairings here that go really well together, and I'll use that as a baseline for some builds later in the video. If you don't really care about all that mumbo jumbo, there will be some timestamps down in the description that you can use to take you straight to the build section of this video. So without further ado, let's get into those perk synergies. This first one is Lethal Pursuer and Floods of Rage. Lethal Pursuer was already a borderline great perk for Oni before 24.5, since getting that first hit is so important and knowing exactly where survivors are at the start of a match can get you that hit sooner. Now it's a top tier perk, especially for Oni, since on top of that, all of your aura reading effects last for 2 seconds longer. This means that the more aura reading you run, the more value Lethal Pursuer will give you. This perk is so good now that it actually makes Renjiro's Bloody Glove a decent option for your add-ons. Floods of Rage is also just a really solid perk on Oni even before this change, because 7 seconds was already a solid chunk of time for you to be able to use your power and find somebody, or even catch someone unaware, or if you're already in chase, use your power on the loop, plenty of stuff you could do with it. But 9 seconds, that's of course even better. Next is Hex Ruin and Surveillance. As a disclaimer up front, Hex Ruin is not very good on its own anymore. I would put Jolt here so that it's more in line with what other killers use with Surveillance, but Oni's power doesn't work that well with Jolt. That said, following the meta shakeup, people realized just how powerful of an information perk that Surveillance really is. As long as Hex Ruin stays up, you'll basically have perfect information on what generators are being worked on. As a bonus, people are more likely to leave Ruin up now that it's weaker, so this combo is actually a fair bit better than you might think at first glance. Now we have Overcharge and Call of Brine. These regression bonuses stack, and on top of this, if the survivor misses the Overcharge skill check, you'll know, and the generator will lose 15% total progress. If they hit the skill check and get any more skill checks while repairing the generator, you will know, because Call of Brine will alert you. If the generator is just left alone, it'll regress very quickly. Up next is Gift of Pain and any other Scourge Hook perk. White Hook perks stack, so running multiple is actually a pretty solid option overall, and you're not really giving up much. On top of that, Gift of Pain makes for a really solid perk option for Oni, since it was basically buffed twice in a row. Mangled and Hemorrhage is great for Oni, and the slowdown is really solid with the 24.5 changes. Next is one of my favorites, Hex Pentimento and Hex Plaything. Plaything creates totems that survivors are pretty incentivized to cleanse, since they would be oblivious if they just left them up. Not being able to hear Oni's terror radius can be really scary, and with Pentimento, once survivors cleanse the totems, you'll get a bunch of free generator slowdown throughout the game. Coming back is Dead Man's Switch and Pain Resonance. Yes, this combo is back again. It's a fair bit weaker than before 24.5 though, since there's still no notification on Pain Resonance, and now DMS is only 30 seconds. All the same, it's still a powerful combination that'll give you a ton of generator blocking throughout the game, unless the survivors play around it. Finally, we have Infectious Fright and Monitor and Abuse. This is a combo that's been solid on Oni since his release. Having a varying terror radius from a Monitor and Abuse is great for sneaking up on survivors to get an early hit, and using that synergy with Infectious Fright to find other survivors after clubbing one down with your power. Your other two perks just need to be solid slowdown. No builds in this video are going to be using this pairing, but don't let that make you afraid to use them in your builds. This combo is very strong still. Now that we've gone over a bunch of good combos for you to put in your Oni build, let's show some standalone perks that do some serious work for Oni's game plan. Spoiler, most of them are options for slowdown or information. First up is No Way Out. This perk was already really good before 24.5, and now that gens take longer to do, it's way easier to get your 4 stacks even in a tough game. Survivors having to last another 60 seconds against Oni out in the open in the endgame can easily mean another kill or 2 for you. Next is Deadlock. Following the initial nerf of the Pain Resonance and Deadman Switch combo, Deadlock became a very nice slowdown option for pretty much every killer in the game. In the perfect scenario, this will block critical generators for a total of 2 minutes throughout the match. Even though Pain Resonance and Deadman Switch is back, this is still a very good option. Next is one I've already made a separate video about, Merciless Storm. This perk has a lower floor but a higher ceiling than Deadlock for gen slowdown. Sometimes this perk will give you so much free information and slowdown throughout a game, and sometimes this perk will do basically nothing. Even after the synergy with Pain Resonance was nerfed in 6.1.2, this perk can still put in a lot of work. Now we have Eruption. If you'd have asked me before 24.5, I'd have told you Eruption just wasn't worth the effort to get it to work, but now it definitely is. 10% repair progress and 25 seconds of incapacitated is very painful to muscle through. If it's combined with other gen kicking perks, you can really grind down a team in the late game if they 3-gen themselves. Next up is Discordance. With a lot of information perks being nerfed and Prove Thyself being on the rise, Discordance can show you which generators will be done quickly, and if you can get the drop on 2 survivors at a generator with your power, this can usually mean a pretty easy down for you. Finally, we have Darkness Revealed. This can function as a better barbecue and chili after getting a hook, or as a good way to find someone if you're just completely lost. With Lethal Pursuer, this perk becomes even nicer to use. The downside is it's very map dependent. Now that I've gone over all of that, using some perk synergies and maybe some solid standalone perks, you can make a really solid build for Oni just from that. In my Oni guide video, I talked about a formula that I found good Oni builds to follow, and that's 2 information perks, 1 slowdown perk, and 1 utility or a second slowdown perk. It is worth noting that some perks have overlap. For example, Call of Brine gives both slowdown and information. I still think this is the best and most efficient way to build Oni even after 24.5, but with the current meta you can definitely get away with just stacking a ton of slowdown. But with all that out of the way, I'm finally going to talk about the builds that I've come to as being really solid for Oni. I'm going to give you 3 builds I think are really solid in pretty much every situation, 1 build that is frustrating to play against but a little inconsistent, and finally, 1 build you can use if you have no killer perks unlocked and Oni is your first killer. This first build is probably his best, in my opinion, and a solid balance of everything. Lethal Pursuer, Scourge Hooks, Floods of Rage, and Gift of Pain, and No Way Out. This build incorporates 2 synergies and a standalone perk following the aforementioned formula. Lethal Pursuer is again great for finding survivors at the start of the match for a good early hit and or down. Floods of Rage activates when a survivor is unhooked from a white hook, revealing the aura of all other survivors for 7 seconds, but it's 9 seconds with this build because of Lethal Pursuer. Aura reading really is the best form of information, and this combo gives it to you in spades. Since we are already running Floods of Rage, there's almost no opportunity cost to adding in Gift of Pain, and it's a solid slowdown perk that can also keep survivors injured for longer throughout the game, fueling our power as Oni. Finally, No Way Out gives us a lot of extra time to threaten and pressure survivors, even if they make it to the end game. It also pretty much guarantees the 4K if you find the hatch before the last survivor. There are a few variations you could do for this build, such as swapping Gift of Pain and No Way Out for Pain Resonance and Deadman Switch, but I would say Lethal Pursuer is a minimum, and Floods of Rage is very, very powerful for Oni, so you either have to not have it or genuinely think something is better. If you don't have Gifted Pain or want to swap it out, like I said before, I think Pain Resonance is the best replacement even if you don't have Dead Man's Switch. If you don't have or want to swap out No Way Out, I would recommend Deadlock or Merciless Storm for some passive slowdown. If you're like me and you'd like even more information, I had a lot of fun testing this build out. It swaps Gift of Pain for Pain Resonance and has Darkness Revealed as the final perk to really abuse Lethal Pursuer. It's very map dependent since Darkness Revealed has dead spots on some maps, but Oni is one of the best abusers for this perk, and in a lot of cases, it can be a much better barbecue and chili. This next one was a build I was advocating for Oni even before 24.5 came out. Shattered Hope, Hex's Retribution, Pentimento, and Plaything. This build follows the formula a little loosely, but we're going to have to go backwards in explaining it, trust me, this is the best way. First, Plaything activates a totem the first time we hook each survivor. The totem's aura is revealed to their respective survivor, is blocked for each other survivor for a bit, and as long as the totem isn't cleansed, the associated survivor is oblivious. This means they don't hear a terror radius, and despite how loud Oni is, you'll be surprised how often you catch survivors completely off guard, even in your power. This forces the survivors to cleanse the totems and fuels this next perk, Pentimento. You can reignite destroyed totems for a benefit. Pentimento says a lot of things, but the first one is the most important to us, 30% slower generator progress. This adds almost 30 seconds to the repair time of each generator. Sometimes you'll get the other effects and it can be nice, but the first one's the main focus. Next, the previous two perks that I talked about fuel Hex Retribution. The Oblivious that it gives can be nice, but we are running it for the 15 seconds of aura reading when a survivor cleanses a totem. 15 seconds is the single longest source of aura reading in the game, and Oni can really abuse that 15 seconds. Finally, Shattered Hope. This build is kind of countered by boon totems, and survivors seem to like boons even more now than they did before 24.5, so this is basically a failsafe for the rest of the build. It lets you still fuel Pentimento even if survivors are booning a bunch. Sometimes you have a match with no boons, sometimes you have a match with what feels like a million. Finally, the aura reading that Shattered Hope provides sometimes comes into play. There are some variations you can run with this build, but this is the best one that I found. It doesn't follow the formula, but it's very aggressive, and it's just 4 Hex perks, Hex's Devour Hope, Undying, Pentimento, and Plaything. This build came about because a lot of survivors were just countering Pentimento and Retribution by just not cleansing their Plaything totems. Well, with this build, if they ignore totems because of Plaything, they'll rapidly find themselves falling victim to Devour Hope, and by then it can already be too late. Undying is here to protect Devour Hope, both so it doesn't get cleansed before you get any value from it, and so you can squeeze just a little bit more value out of it once you get later in the match. 3 stacks of Devour Hope with some survivors being oblivious because of Plaything is also a very scary prospect by itself, especially if all 5 totems are lit. Finally, if all else fails, you will get some Pentimento value out of this build. They will cleanse Devour Hope and Undying like their life depends on it. So at minimum, you're going to be able to reignite those with Pentimento. Also, this was the build I was finally able to get all 5 Pentimento totems with, and I lived the dream after dozens upon dozens of Pentimento Plaything games. Alright, this third build does not follow the formula exactly, but it is very formidable in its own right. Surveillance, Hex's Undying and Ruin, and No Way Out. First, Surveillance has proven itself in 24.5 as a really solid information perk. If you can reliably keep generators regressing, you will have perfect information on generators. Undying kind of gives information, sometimes, but it's really just here to protect Ruin. Now, Ruin, despite being nerfed into the ground, is the all-star of this build. As long as it stays up, Surveillance will give you perfect information on generators and which generators are being repaired. Finally, No Way Out is the way to bridge the gap between when Ruin gets destroyed, whether it's by survivors or by you killing a survivor, and the endgame. This build can be tweaked a fair bit, all things considered. Ruin and Surveillance have to stay, but you can freely replace the other 2 perks in order to keep Surveillance relevant throughout the game. Even though it's suboptimal on Oni since it doesn't work with your power, Jolt can be a really powerful way to get surveillance to apply on multiple generators even after Ruin is gone, and it's even usable while Ruin is still up. Eruption can put in solid work here once Ruin is cleansed. Scourge Hook Pain Resonance is another solid choice here, allowing you to keep tabs on the most progressed generator. Lastly, I don't personally think it's a good perk because of the long cooldown, but Oppression can do the job of regressing multiple generators for surveillance pretty reliably. I have two more builds for you in this video. This first one is a really annoying gen kicking build, focused on using Oni's pressure and lethality to keep generator progress in check to set up a powerful late game gen setup. Eruption, Call of Brine, Overcharge, and Pop Goes the Weasel. I know, it doesn't follow the formula very well, but the sheer amount of gen regression here is very powerful. Eruption is great for when you are patrolling generators and pressuring survivors. Oni can also very easily down a healthy survivor and proc it on multiple generators using his power. Next, Call of Brine provides very fast regression and information if a survivor gets back on the generator quickly. Overcharge gives a lot more regression if a generator goes untouched, but if it does get touched and the skill checks get missed, 15% regression is nothing to scoff at. Finally, even though it got nerfed pretty hard, Pop Goes the Weasel is still a solid perk for Oni. 20% current progress is devastating on a generator that is near completion, and Oni can get a few procs of this in rapid succession if you sluck with your power. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This build is inconsistent, to say the least. If a survivor team is coordinated, or came to the game with the goal of absolutely slamming gens with something like cracked toolboxes and or prove thyself, you will struggle, especially if you don't get a good start as Oni. However, if the survivors try to play the game safe and at their own pace, healing whenever they can, trying to do, generators around the map, this build shines. If survivors let you, you can grind the game to a complete halt and make it one of the most annoying DVD experiences they've ever had. This final build is a build you can use if you don't have any other killer prestiged yet to get their perks on Oni. Spies from the Shadow, Deerstalker, Blood Echo, and Sloppy Butcher. Every time I use Spies from the Shadows, it surprises me with how effective of an information perk it really is. Survivors trying to be stealthy near you will still set off crows, making it really hard to hide from you. If you prefer, Bitter Murmur can also be a really solid information perk. Deerstalker is a great starter perk for newer Oni and killer players, since you can learn when and how to slug with his power without having to worry about losing survivors on the ground. Blood Echo is great for countering exhaustion perks, and sometimes apply hemorrhage. Following the drop in popularity for Dead Hard in 24.5, Fearmonger is also a perfectly viable alternative to Blood Echo that can be more effective in certain situations, such as when a survivor is saving their sprint burst or life. Lastly, Sloppy Butcher applies Mangled, which makes healing take 25% longer, and Hemorrhage, which makes the healing bar deplete rapidly if the survivor is not actively healing. Together, these two status effects will supply you with additional blood orbs throughout the entire game. Well, this has been my post 24.5 Oni build guide. It's been a long time coming ever since my How to Play Oni guide was released. Originally, this video was going to be a section inside of that one. But while editing that video, Behavior revealed the perk changes for 24.5, forcing me to scrap every build I had in that video at the time. Then, while working on this video, Behavior suddenly did some more balance changing with 6.1.2 and 6.1.3, forcing me to scrap a build revolving around the synergy between Thanatophobia and Gift of Pain, as well as having to do some more testing for the return of Pain Resonance and Dead Man Switch. All that said, I'm so glad to finally have this video completed and out the door so I can start focusing on other exciting projects. If you found this video helpful and or enjoyable, and you want to see what content I have for you in the future, please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment down below, and come over to my Twitch and drop a follow and some love there. I'm still doing this as a hobby right now, so I mean it when I say words cannot describe how much it means to me to see all the support and love I've been getting from you guys for my hard work. My How to Play Oni guide has gotten more attention and positive reception than I could have ever dreamed. And I'm not afraid to admit I cried more than once while reading all of your comments in that video. That wraps this one up. So, as always, much love, and I hope to see you all next time. Peace.